So, Mike, you're starting a podcast.
I am starting a podcast.
Big Closets, Small Planet. And as I understand it, you're going to be looking at the environmental and social impacts of the fashion and apparel industry and taking a dive into some of the hot topics, ideas and innovations that are needed to transform the industry.
Yes, it's going to be a great deal of fun, a lot of learning.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, I've known you for a long time, probably actually longer than I'd like to admit.
What do you mean by that?
We're getting on for a couple of decades now.
Okay.
But for as long as I've known you, you've been very interested and very involved in sustainability, environmental issues. Many of the people who are going to be listening in to your podcast, though, are going to be relatively new to the topic, particularly perhaps within the industry area. So can you give us some background information, an overview of why the topic is so important and so relevant?
Sure. So I was also thinking back, decades, and I'm thinking about when I first used to go into my closet. I never thought about the impacts of this particular industry. And yet now, after many years, when I look in my closets and I pick out those lovely clothes.
I don't think I'd like to look into your closet.
I got some cool stuff. But I also get quite worried, actually. I get concerned. And that's something that frustrates me.
But why? In what way?
Well, we all like fashion and clothing. And I think it touches nearly everyone. And when it's at its best, I would say that fashion and apparel, it's not only functional, of course, it's also fun, it's expressive.
Right.
It's sexy. And as an industry, it can be very profitable. It has been for many. But when it's at its worst, right, fashion and apparel is also addictive. It's exploitative, it pollutes, and is extremely wasteful. In other words, it's sort of the essence of what we call unsustainable consumption.
Okay, but can you be more specific? I mean, unsustainable in what way?
Well, I think to be specific, I need to paint you a broader picture. So let's first start with some of these projections around population growth. The United Nations projects by the year 2030, there'll be around 8.5 or more billion people living on the planet. And they're also saying that nearly 5 billion of these people will be part of a global middle class, right? So if you think about that, if all of these middle class citizens are anything like us, they're going to want to use their new wealth to consume, to buy things, and they want to consume the latest fashions.
Right. You're saying 2030. I mean, that's what, 12 years off? Not even 12 years off.
Well, that's actually interesting you bring that up. That's an interesting time frame. 12 years. What did you do 12 years ago?
12 years ago, I guess I was probably starting my first Facebook account.
That's right.
12
I hadn't
years
thought
ago.
about that.
Yeah, iPhone arrived about that time, I guess, something over 10 years ago.
Yeah, we think those have been with us forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the population increase, which I think we all understand, but the middle class component of that is key, almost tripling. So if there are this massive increase, or is this massive increase in middle class, we're going to see a massive increase in consumption.
That's right. And unfortunately, consumption has been connected to not just a number of good things, but also negative environmental impacts. And what we're learning now is it's not just that this consumption will create some bad impacts, but in fact, some of these impacts could be catastrophic.
Well, that's pretty strong. So give us some examples. Explain what you say.
Okay. So I'm going to start with just, the idea of waste, right, which people can get their heads around. There was a report by Reverse Resources just a couple years ago, and they were estimating that the industry creates between 40 billion and 120 billion square meters of material waste every year. That's enough, they said, to cover countries like Estonia or North Korea, right? So just the amount of waste is incredible. But that's not really the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is that greenhouse gases emissions created by the industry are quite significant. There was a report recently by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, one of many that come out now that are incredibly important. And they were saying that the total greenhouse gas emissions created annually by the apparel sector are more than the emissions created by all international flights and maritime shipping combined. And if the industry continues with business as usual, they're saying, by the year 2050, it will be responsible for more than 26% of the carbon budget needed to stay within a 2-degree temperature increase.
Wow. So you're saying one industry, the apparel industry, responsible for more than 1/4 of the allowable budget?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing good
Now
math.
I'm understanding why you're thinking this could be catastrophic.
Yeah, I'm laughing at your math, but not at the issue.
Right.
I'll say that.
Good. Laugh at my math anytime you want.
Okay. So greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, a driver of a lot of the environmental problems, major contributor. But then we add to the fact that the industry uses also lots of other resources that are essential for us, right? Which ones do you think these are?
Well, obviously the materials, material production.
Material production. So let's get...
Color, dyes.
Yeah, do you think about water as a resource?
Yeah, no, not directly.
Okay, well, water is something that's on the agenda now. It wasn't a couple of years ago, in fact. And a concrete example could be helpful, probably. So let's use cotton, right? A lot of people know about cotton. Well, depending on where and how cotton is grown, it can require between 10,000 and 20,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of cotton.
That's crazy. 20,000 liters of water for 1 single kilogram.
Yeah, so I want to emphasize it depends, again, where it's grown, it varies, but it can be up to 20,000 liters for 1 kilogram of cotton.
But I guess it's not just the production I was mentioning before, other stuff. I mean, the actual production process.
Yeah, so throughout the whole life cycle of from cultivation to use and end of use, there are other stages, and one stage is when you dye and finish materials, right? And there's a lot of chemicals used in that, and they're used significantly. And what we found is that when they're released into the environment, they pollute the waterways, they pollute the ecosystems, they affect our health. There are estimates that 20% of the world's industrial water pollution could be attributed to these processes, 20% of the world's industrial pollution. And according to China Water Risk, if you're going to put this also in perspective, China Water Risk is a think tank based in Hong Kong. The Chinese textile industry discharges double the amount of water than the Chinese coal industry, right? And China produces almost half of the world's coal.
Right. And then I guess, because they're all pretty established areas, but there must be a whole stack of other things that we haven't even really started to understand.
Yeah, and that's the scariest thing, is we're finding new stuff that are problematic, right? So in recent years, textiles have been identified as a major contributor to the growing problem of plastics in our oceans. This is because of the millions of microfibers that shed from textiles. And I'm learning today that it's not just the plastics the microfibers come from, it also comes from natural fibers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand now, I think, the name of the podcast. Big
It's genial,
closets,
isn't it?
Small planet.
Big closet, small
So
planet.
while our closets are getting bigger and bigger, our negative impact on this small planet we're living on are also increasing.
Right, so that's the message.
Mm-hmm. But doesn't the industry also create, a lot of employment, for example, poorer countries, particular groups?
So that's a very good point. And reports vary in their estimates, but in the recent Ellen MacArthur report, they also state that the industry is worth around $1.3 trillion and it creates employment for at least 300 million people worldwide. That's probably a low number because a lot of the people working in production countries work without formal contracts, right? So their data is not reported. And there's an argument that these jobs have been essential because they, in particular, provide women in poorer countries their first employment opportunities.
Well, that sounds all quite constructive.
It's very constructive, but even so, many garment workers in production countries still struggle to earn enough to even meet their basic needs. Many still work in unsafe, high-pressure working environments. And when we compare our lifestyles and how much consumed to what they're still getting, it feels out of balance.
Right, so there's a long way to go. But is there a link between the economic and environmental issues here?
We think there could be, and even as the economic situation improves for workers, these environmental problems like global warming, right, and water scarcity and water pollution, all those things, they may undermine this progress that we've been making. And so we need to see them in connection.
Right. So there's a lot of progress to be made. And Mike, I know you've been working both at the micro level, supporting companies in integrating sustainability into their daily work, but even more so at a macro level, working, with industry organizations, watchdogs, thought leaders and the like to identify changes that will truly transform the industry. I hear a lot about sustainability and fashion. With your understanding, with that network you have, that contact base you have, is it all doom and gloom?
Thank God it's not. And in fact, this is what's so exciting about working with this industry right now. Every day, more and more leaders in the industry seem to be getting serious. They're serious about change. There's the activists and NGOs that continue to drive change in partnership with a number of visionary companies. So that's good to see. What's most exciting is that there are new platforms emerging, some to help better measure and manage progress, some to identify and finance new innovations, and even develop new business models, which is what many people think needs to happen. Some of these new innovations are mind-blowing, I'm telling you, and have great potential. There are new fibers made from fruit skins and waterless dyeing processes. There are digital printers making production more local. Fibers even made from carbon dioxide. Right. There are developments in synthetic leather and business models focused on leasing instead of buying. So the creativity that's bubbling up is pretty cool, pretty amazing. Right. There are governments working also, making fashion and apparel part of their sustainability plans and policies. There is focus on improving people's wages. So all these things are happening. But I'll say, even with all this exciting work, if we're going to meet the key sustainability goals within timeframes proposed by the latest science, we're going to need to do a lot more, a lot more. We're going to need to completely rethink how fashion is produced, used, and consumed, and we have to do it very quickly.
Right. So, Mike, I know that one of your hopes with this podcast is that you're going to be able to inspire and create some of the momentum that's needed for this change to actually take place. Who are you going to be talking with?
So we want to hear from the different sectors and actors who can drive change. So business leaders, sustainability experts, innovators and entrepreneurs, watchdog representatives and legislators. We want to discuss the hot topics and the inspiring innovations. We're going to do the hard talk and the inspiring talk, right? Exploring the levers for change. I think we need to unpack all of that.
Right.
So if you're a current or aspiring change agent working in or with the fashion and apparel industry, I think this podcast is going to be for you. I really do.
Great.
So tune in.
I'm looking forward to it.